In the 1950s, one of the best-selling tonics in America was a supplement called Geritol, sold with a single, unforgettable slogan. It was for people with tired blood. Millions of people bought it. Housewives in television commercials would drag themselves through the day, take a spoonful of Geritol, and suddenly be full of energy again. The active ingredient behind that promise was iron. There was just one problem. Most of the people buying it were not actually iron deficient at all, and by 1965 U.S. regulators forced the company to stop claiming the product could cure fatigue in the general population, because the evidence simply was not there. So here's a question worth sitting with before we go any further. If a plain iron pill cannot fix tiredness in an average adult who is not deficient, does it actually help someone who is training hard enough to run their body into the ground? That is not a rhetorical question. It is one of the most argued over topics in sports medicine, and it turns out athletes have a genuinely different relationship with iron than the rest of us. To understand why, you first need to know what iron actually does inside your body, because it is not just about blood. Iron sits at the center of more than 180 separate biochemical reactions. It is the core of hemoglobin, the molecule in red blood cells that carries oxygen from your lungs to every working muscle. It is also the core of myoglobin, which stores oxygen inside the muscle itself. On top of that, iron powers several enzymes in the respiratory chain, the assembly line inside your cells that turns oxygen and fuel into usable energy. Without enough iron, that assembly line slows down, even before your blood test shows anything alarming. That last part is the part almost nobody understands correctly. Iron deficiency does not begin the day your hemoglobin drops. It begins much earlier, in a quiet stage doctors call iron deficiency non-anemia. In that stage, your hemoglobin can look completely normal on paper. What actually falls first is ferritin, a protein that acts like a warehouse, storing iron inside your cells for whenever your body needs to withdraw some. Think of ferritin like the reserve tank in a car. The engine keeps running fine on the reserve for a while. You would not notice anything wrong from the dashboard. But eventually, if nothing refills that tank, the engine starts to sputter. For most people, that reserve tank barely gets touched. For endurance athletes, it gets drained constantly, and there are more ways for that to happen than you might expect. Start with sweat. Heavy, prolonged training can push meaningful amounts of iron out through the skin, especially in hot conditions where athletes are sweating for hours at a time. Then there is the gut. Long bouts of running have been shown to cause small amounts of gastrointestinal bleeding, invisible day to day, but a steady drain over a training season. Runners lose iron a third way that sounds almost like science fiction. Every time a foot slams into the pavement, red blood cells traveling through the capillaries in that foot can rupture from the sheer mechanical force. Researchers call it foot strike hemolysis, and it happens with literally every stride of a long run. So here's a strange question. How can some of the fittest, most trained people on the planet test as anemic? Some of them walk into a lab, take a blood test, and come out with numbers that look a lot like real iron deficiency. Some of that really is a shortage of iron. But some of it is something else entirely, a phenomenon called dilutional pseudoanemia, where serious endurance training expands the actual volume of blood plasma so much that hemoglobin gets diluted, without a real shortage of iron underneath it. Untangling a real deficiency from that harmless dilution is genuinely difficult, and getting it wrong matters, because treating an athlete who was never actually low on iron does nothing but risk side effects. There is one more piece of this puzzle that surprised scientists for years, and it involves a hormone most people have never heard of: hepcidin. Hepcidin is released by the liver, and its job is to act like a gatekeeper, controlling how much iron your gut is allowed to absorb from food and how much iron gets released from your body's storage sites. Here is the twist. Intense exercise triggers inflammation, and that inflammation spikes hepcidin, sometimes within hours of a hard training session. When hepcidin rises, it slams the gate shut on iron absorption, right when an athlete's body might need it the most. So does it matter whether an athlete takes an iron pill first thing in the morning or right after a brutal workout? It might matter more than most people assume. Taking iron right after a hard training session can be close to pointless if hepcidin has already slammed that gate shut for the day. Put all of that together, and it is easy to see why iron deficiency is not rare in athletic populations. Estimates suggest it affects somewhere between 3 and 11% of male athletes. For female athletes, the numbers are dramatically higher, somewhere between 15 and 35%, driven by everything we just covered, plus menstrual blood loss, plus a sport culture that, in disciplines like distance running or aesthetic sports, often pushes athletes toward eating less than their training actually demands. Given all of that, you would think the science on iron supplements for athletes would be completely settled by now. Is it? It is not, and honestly, that surprises most people the first time they hear it. Different small studies over the decades have pointed in completely different directions. Some found real improvements in blood markers after supplementation. Others found nothing measurable at all, even in athletes who seemed to genuinely need it. One trial gave non-anemic, highly trained rowers a moderate daily dose of iron for 6 weeks and found no significant change in any iron marker whatsoever. Another trial, using a higher dose over the same 6 weeks, reported serum ferritin jumping by roughly 77%, though even after that jump, the athlete's levels only just crossed into the low end of the normal range. A third trial went even further, giving highly trained female runners a very high daily dose. Their baseline iron stores were already within the normal range to begin with, and the supplement changed essentially nothing about their blood work or their performance. So you had 3 serious, well-run studies and 3 different stories. One group of scientists looked at that mess and asked the obvious next question. What happens if you stop looking at these trials one at a time and instead pool every trial you can find into a single, much larger analysis? That is exactly what a team based at the University of Ljubljana set out to do. And their search process alone tells you how scattered this evidence really was. They combed through 6 major research databases, hunting for every randomized, controlled trial of oral iron supplementation in healthy, physically active adults. Their initial search returned 638 separate papers. After removing duplicates and screening out anything unrelated to the question, they were left with a strict, final shortlist. Just 13 trials met every one of their criteria, together covering 449 people, 432 of them women, all of whom took oral iron with no other supplement mixed in, compared against a placebo or an untreated control group. Every one of those 13 studies was independently scored for methodological quality, and the vast majority came back rated as genuinely high quality. So this was not a pile of weak evidence. It was a small but well-built body of evidence, finally analyzed together instead of one paper at a time. So after pooling everything, what actually happened to these athletes' blood? Ferritin, the reserve tank we talked about earlier, rose in a way that was large and statistically solid. That effect held up even after the researchers removed the single most influential study from the analysis, just to make sure one outlier trial was not carrying the whole result. Hemoglobin also trended upward after supplementation, but here is where the picture gets more complicated. That increase did not reach statistical significance across the pooled data, and neither did 2 other blood markers doctors use to judge iron status. Physical performance told a similarly muted story. Across the trials that measured maximal oxygen consumption, the ceiling of how much oxygen an athlete's body can actually use during hard exercise, supplementation produced only a small trend toward improvement, and the researchers themselves flagged that this particular result rested on fairly low-quality evidence. Here is the detail that explains almost every contradictory result from those earlier individual trials we mentioned. Who actually benefited depended almost entirely on how depleted someone was before they started. Athletes who began with ferritin at or below 12 micrograms per liter, the threshold that marks full iron deficiency anemia, showed the clearest, most meaningful gains. Athletes who started above that cutoff saw next to nothing move, no matter how much iron they swallowed. Even more telling, in 10 of the 13 studies, ferritin still had not climbed back above 35 micrograms per liter by the end of supplementation, the marker doctors use for even the earliest stage of iron deficiency. The pills worked. They just did not work fast, and they did not work miracles. Dose and duration turned out to separate the successful trials from the disappointing ones almost perfectly. The protocols that produced real benefits used somewhere between 16 and 100 milligrams of elemental iron a day, taken consistently for 6 to 8 weeks. Every trial that ran a shorter course reported little to no measurable change. Put that next to the Geritol story from the beginning of this video, and the picture snaps into focus. Iron supplements are not a magic energy switch you flip overnight. In athletes with a real, confirmed shortage, weeks of the right dose can genuinely refill the tank. In anyone whose tank was never actually low, that same pill does close to nothing, exactly what regulators forced Geritol to admit almost 60 years ago. The researchers were careful to add one more caution on top of all this. Oral iron can cause real gastrointestinal side effects, and professional sports nutrition guidelines already recommend against routine, unsupervised iron supplementation without a blood test confirming an actual deficiency first. The honest takeaway is narrower than the supplement aisle would have you believe. If you are genuinely depleted, iron supplementation, taken at the right dose for long enough, can measurably restock your reserves. If you were never actually low, no amount of tired blood marketing changes what the evidence actually shows.